We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
I was furious to hear about these things.
So, hello and welcome to the indyref anniversary special of Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record, and I'm joined this week by Sunday Mail editor Lorna Hughes and Douglas Dickie from the Scottish Daily Express. So, much has been written over the last 7 days about the 2014 referendum. It's hard to know where to begin. It was such a momentous event in Scottish history. But I guess the question I'm interested in exploring is whether Scotland is actually better off for having a referendum. And I've got mixed feelings on it. I mean, there were many good things. 85% turnout was pretty extraordinary. The engagement of young people in the political process was also hugely impressive. And obviously, the eyes of the world were on Scotland for months and months. And all of those things were immensely positive. But, my view is, if you look at the last decade, it's very much a lost decade because no sooner had we finished the first referendum than the SNP were pushing for a second. And at the same time, public services have got worse. The educational attainment gap hasn't narrowed to any significant degree. The NHS is on its knees. Poverty hasn't fallen really at all. And it's just hard to see that Scotland has progressed as a country over the last 10 years. And I don't know what you both think, but the last 10 years to me just feel like a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say about the indyref is, from an Express point of view, we love a story with a happy ending, and this should have had a happy ending back in 2014. But I don't even think the result was official before SNP were already harking after another vote. I remember being at the Count in South Lanarkshire in 2014 when I was a kind of local reporter, and there was a feeling, obviously, of disappointment among the Yes campaign, but it was pretty clear that they didn't see this as the end of the the end of the argument or the end of the debate, and it's because they won an emphatic victory in 2015. They've been able to completely dominate the Scottish political landscape for the past 10 years, which means this constitutional question has also been allowed to dominate the landscape in things like the NHS, the economy. I don't think it's not just because of the indyref incidentally. It's been a bit of a lost decade. There's been it's been, even out with Scotland, it's been quite an epic time that we've had over the past decade. Obviously, we've left the European Union. There's been war in Ukraine, cost of living crisis, COVID. You really couldn't have written that on the morning of September 19th, 2014. So it's not just the indyref, which I think is contributed to that feeling of malaise, but it's been a massive part of it. So was it a good thing that we had a referendum? I don't think at the time it wasn't really a referendum. I don't think anybody really wanted it. It wasn't something that was on people's agenda. I know the SNP won a majority in 2012, but that was because Alex Salmond had done a reasonably good job of running the country between 2007, or running the devolved administration between 2007 and 2012, and it just seems that the vitriol surrounding it as well has never really went away. I know Nats like to talk about it as if it was the greatest experience from sliced bread, which is great for them. But for a lot of people, it was a pretty miserable time, and it's really it's not really in John Swinney. I heard him speak yesterday. It's not in his power to say that this was an overwhelmingly positive experience. The SNP just disregard MD, who doesn't think it was this fantastic moment in Scottish history? And those wounds are still festering. I remember, people who I thought were friends of mine, in the aftermath of it, not calling me directly certain names, but calling people who voted a certain way certain names. So they were directing at me, and they were directing at people that I knew, and it was it was really quite depressing, and it's been quite a depressing decade since.
It's interesting, though, Douglas, because when I go back to that time, if you think about that summer, which was a glorious summer, and we had the Commonwealth Games obviously as well, and there was this sense, whatever side of the fence that you were on, that this was going to change things. I mean, the mere fact, of the campaigning before, you could sense, because I don't think anybody could really call it either way for right up until literally the result. And there was this kind of anticipation in a good way for some, in a very nervous way for others. And I think what's really interesting immediately, obviously, when the result came in, I mean, I don't know if you remember Alex Salmond's speech, but I mean, it was a speech that a few people were saying, hang on a minute, I thought the answer was no. He almost immediately, framed it almost as a win. And from then on, literally, it was acting as if they had indeed won, which is very strategic, because obviously I think, and it worked because, as you said, Douglas, the groundswell of support, and then, the being able to take control of Scotland for such a long period of time. That's what's happened. But I think there, as Paul said, there was some very good things about it, about the engagement. I think for a lot of people, it's really, really divisive, because it's a really divisive question. And it hasn't ever gone away. Now, should it ever go away? I mean, independence now, or support for independence, even, if you don't believe it's 50%, is still higher than it was in the weeks before the referendum itself. So, I don't think it's going to go away. And obviously the difficulties in the last decade have been, they have been acting as if indeed that they won. And, all the other contributing factors that you've discussed means that, Scotland's living standards, everything else, have actually, gone down. But you could also say the same of England as well, and Wales. You're certainly seeing it on the streets. People have got far less money in their pockets. We have, food banks all over the place, and the homeless situation is out of control. And, unfortunately, it does now look as if we have an SNP that isn't, it's not listening. So it's really tricky.
Yeah, I mean, see, if you go back to the Edinburgh Agreement, this was the agreement struck between Scottish and UK governments, basically locking them both into a referendum. And I think by common consent, this was a rare example of both governments coming together and producing something that was accepted by both sides. There was a section on it which said that the Edinburgh Agreement would deliver a result that everyone will respect. Now, by any yardstick, it's hard to argue that the yes side accepted the result, because within days there was talk about indyref 2, and I know that Nicola Sturgeon didn't make the 2015 general election about indyref 2, but it came up pretty quickly thereafter. Obviously, Brexit was a massive, massive issue, and I don't really blame the SNP for trying to use that to the max. But for the last 10 years, we've just been on this merry-go-round of dates and milestones for indyref 2, this sort of phantom referendum that never materialised. And
so, do you think it's a good thing, Paul, that Swinney is saying it is off the table?
Yes, I do. I think that credit where credit is due. We've had Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf, who both played the game of saying that if the SNP win a certain election, then that's a mandate for indyref 2 and it must happen. John Swinney has basically looked at the terrible result that his party was handed in July the 4th, realised that his party is not ready for indyref 2. There's no public appetite for it, and has decided to build the case for independence. And I think he's right. If public opinion showed sustained support for independence at levels of 60%, 65%, that would carry a lot more moral weight than independence at 51 or 50 or 49%, where clearly it's still a contested issue. Clearly the country is still divided down the centre, and an indyref would try and somehow alter the balance rather than confirming what would be the settled will of the Scottish people. So I think that John Swinney's leadership so far has been quite encouraging on that. He's been trying to reach out to no voters, maybe with a sort of one Scotland approach, and I think it's in stark contrast to his two predecessors.
Can I just to kind of take up on a point we've been saying about the level of support for Indy? One of the biggest myths of the independence referendum is that it was a close-run thing. It wasn't. I mean, it was nearer 11%, 10%. I think only 2 polls in the entire campaign showed yes in the lead. Are just a handful. It never had a sustained lead. So it should have been the end of it. But Alex Salmond's going to come in for a lot of stick here. Nicola Sturgeon's coming in for a lot of stick. David Cameron shouldn't escape stick either for the frankly blasé way he went about the whole independence referendum. He basically allowed Salmond to pick the date, pick the question, a very loaded question, incidentally. I mean, every bit of evidence there is will show you that if Scots are asked if they want to leave the UK, then it's certainly not close. There's far fewer people want to leave answer that they want to leave the UK than, and it's such a monumental decision. It seems so strange to me that people are just sort of like treating independence as if it was like a normal policy, something you just do, or we'll become independent after that. Like this is the breakup of a 300-year-old nation. We're not talking about more funding for the NHS here, and for it to be for Cameron to allow the SNP to present it in such a binary way, to allow them to pick every basically have it on their terms, for it to be 50+1 and to completely end the existence of the UK. That was absolutely bonkers. And if there is to be an indyref 2, then quite frankly the rules of it need to change, because we just cannot go through this again.
See, on that, Dougie, just before you come in, Lorna, I interviewed Jim Murphy this week, the former Scottish Labour leader, who was a Better Together stalwart, and he made that exact same point, which is that he feels like the Gordon Brown government made a mistake in not calling the referendum when Labour were in charge, because he says that if that had happened, the question would be, do you want Scotland to remain in the United Kingdom? And Murphy said that Labour would be campaigning for yes.
Yes,
and it would be
absolutely.
Campaign.
And even, let's be honest here, Better Together. What I've said it for 10 years. What an awful campaign name. It was just so uninspiring. Stay United. There's a much better one, right, for them. Stay United. It's like a football team. And it took me 10 seconds to come up with that. And the best they could do was Better Together. Oh, it was just dreadful. Anyway, sorry, Lorna.
No. But, as Paul says, that undoubtedly the whole framing of the question, if the answer you want to instinctively say yes to something, not say no to something. So, yeah, you're right. But you could, on the other hand, say that, Salmond played a blinding in that. I mean,
Yeah.
a hugely experienced politician who was able at that point to even get an agreement for a referendum, and then was able, although, I mean, I think he has admitted, as we've read at the weekend, that, he couldn't believe his luck when effectively they agreed to the question that the SNP wanted. But there is no doubt that there was a lot of, Salmond is a very astute politician, probably whether you like him or dislike him, one of the few people that could have done that at that time, and he did it. And I'm not sure that there is anybody who is able to certainly do that with a new government, which are clearly not interested anyway. But it's very difficult to go, should we not have had it? Should Cameron have said completely no? Could we not still be in a place where we're still talking, about it? Because I don't think the SNP would have gone away. I still think they would have been a dominant force. I think we would have been talking about it. Possibly, had they actually governed, particularly in the last few years, a bit better, they might have got there. That's the thing.
It's funny that, Lorna, you mentioned Alex Salmond. It's impossible to discuss the indyref without focusing on the key role that he played. He was probably the central figure in the entire referendum. And I've got conflicted views on him because I think in many ways, he's the most gifted politician of his generation. You look at his first spell as leader in the late 80s and 90s and the way he professionalised the SNP. Then he comes back, takes him into government for the first time, has a relatively successful first term, then wins a majority, an unprecedented majority in 2011, and then his government secures the referendum. And all of that is, hugely positive for him in terms of a legacy. But, I look at the legacy of Alex Salmond after the referendum. Actually, not just after the referendum, but I look at some of his behaviour during the referendum, particularly to journalists and to the media. And I think about the way he sort of patronised and belittled a younger Daily Telegraph reporter, the way he sort of harangued Faisal Islam, the broadcaster, and then, to his shame, the way he banned media outlets from attending the post-result press conference. Now, 2 years after that, I remember following Trump and Trump's rallies and the way that Trump belittled journalists and the media and berated them, and the way that Trump was soft on Putin in the same way that Salmond has been, frankly. And I just feel like watching Salmond deal with the media in 2014, he was pretty much Trump before Trump. A sort of populist politician who didn't really respect the norms, didn't respect the media, thought the media was out to get him. And I feel like his positive legacy has been tarnished by some of his behaviour during the referendum and certainly after it.
Yeah, I think it's, as you say, you can't think about the referendum without thinking about Salmond and his part in it. And undoubtedly, I think what you're saying is correct. We do remember that time. I don't think we necessarily recognised it for what it was then. I mean, what I would say is that he set that tone then, and he was probably a very upset and very angry man. Remember, he'd been handed a poll literally, I think about 24 hours before that was said you're on course for winning. And yeah, it was the populism. What I would say is that, if that was bad, the current SNP in its various forms has become 100 times worse. And I think, kind of pales some of Sam's behaviour on that into something else, to be honest.
I remember that sort of angry salmon persona. There was a kind of Twitter
Yes.
parody account, and he kind of took that on. He kind of played into it a bit. I think it's really sad seeing Salmon now. I really think, regardless of your opinion on him, Paul, I'm not sure if he's the most talented politician of his generation, but he's certainly the most talented Scottish politician of his generation, and he's certainly up there. He's been a huge figure, and to see him now kind of leading this fringe party, rehashing decades-old claims about Vladimir Putin, it's quite sad. But I remember a week before the referendum, John Prescott arrived in Rutherglen, and I was sent to cover it. I actually interviewed Salmon and Alistair Darnell in the lead up to the referendum, despite just working on the Rutherglen Reformer. And I remember Prescott came up, and it was all rather exciting, but it was obvious that the Yes supporters who turned up had been whipped into a bit of a frenzy, I think, and it was clear to me that they weren't accepting any other view other than their own, and that attitude came from the top, and it's continued for 10 years. Anyone who questions the SNP, we've seen the protests outside the BBC, we've seen horrific abuse of journalists, we've seen abuse of no voters, and I think that's kind of created, that's Salmon's legacy. Salmon's legacy is those kind of cybernats, and in return, that's kind of created their equivalent unionist side as well. I also remember in the days after that there was a real desire on the unionist side to be, not to rub this in people's faces, to be magnanimous in victory. And then Salmon and Sturgeon couldn't even bother turning up to, most unionists. And then Salmon and Sturgeon couldn't even bother to turn up to this, that service of reconciliation. And that set the tone. That set the tone for the last 10 years. And, they need to own that. And I think over the years, a certain section of unionists have become less willing to play nice, if you like, and it's created this discourse, especially on social media, which we all know can be a total cesspit at times. It's just created this division, and that ultimately will, that will be Alex Salmond's legacy, and it's a divided Scotland.
And here's the thing, Dougie, as well, that we've had the 10-year anniversary. The no side are not triumphalist. They haven't been celebrating this week, and the people I speak to, particularly on the Labour side, when you talk to them about the indyref, it's not a source of joy for them. They look back on it and they shudder, and they look back on it with anxiety because they remember the aggression on the streets and the aggression online. And I was at the John Swinney press conference this week to mark the 10-year anniversary, and the deputy leader of the SNP, Keith Brown, said that he didn't think that the indyref was divisive. I mean, all politics is divisive, but this was particularly divisive. I mean, I'm not criticising that. I think that's inevitable with a binary option referendum, but to deny it was divisive, just to me, it speaks to a politician who's just never willing to see it from the opposite side, to try and put himself in other people's shoes. And, it's Labour folk, as I said, in particular, don't look back on this episode in Scottish history with any fondness whatsoever.
No, I mean, nobody was celebrating. Nobody this week, really. I mean, the SNP obviously can't with all their woes, and as you say, Labour and everybody else looks back, and it was a difficult time. And Dougie's right as well that I think there is an element that still exists that basically, like telling people who voted no, that you were not Scottish enough, you weren't brave enough, you weren't smart enough. And that is kind of thrown at these people. And then, you know, again, as mentioned, the kind of unionists then have got even harder line about it and will taunt them to say, you know, you'll never get another indyref. And I don't know what the answer is. I mean, you know, there is a support for independence. I think that the big trouble is that if the SNP want independence, or rather if independence is on the table, then they really need to start talking to the people who, you know, voted no, instead of just talking to the lowest common denominator. Really,
Lorna, you mentioned the fact that public support for independence is still around 50%. So on one side, you've got people in the SNP who, not Swinney, but you've got folk in the SNP who still believe that winning the Holyrood election result or delivering a pro-independence majority in 2026 should lead to indyref 2. And then you've got the other side who don't want a referendum ever. I'm just wondering if there's a common ground where at some point in the future, both sides can get together and agree a sort of Northern Ireland style process where, you know, there would be a referendum once certain trigger points are met, not just the election of a result, but maybe sustained opinion polling of over 60%, just so that everyone knows what it will take to have a second referendum should the people of Scotland want that.
Yeah, that would be very grown up, Paul, and very sensible. But I don't think it would happen until we have changes of leadership as well, and possibly even great wider than that. Because
I'm a bit wary. Sorry, on you.
No. I imagine you would be wary, Douglas.
No, I'm just going to say I'm always wary of making comparisons with the situation in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I was a bit wary myself,
yeah.
But yeah, you know, whoever is in charge when 2026, you know, it's the SNP now. 2026 has got to govern properly, and it's got to be honest with us, and it's got to deal with, you know, all these very difficult aspects at the moment. Do that, then at some point, maybe within the next decade, people might listen to you if you offer up a positive case and answer the questions that people asked. And they weren't asking because necessarily there were unionists who were trying to trick you. They were asking because they're genuine questions. And then perhaps, but everybody is going to be very nervous about it all over again if and when it comes.
You know, it's 10 years on now, and, you know, just like discussing it as the way we're doing, there's an element that's still quite difficult to process it all. It's a strange thing. It was such probably the most defining Scottish political event of our lifetimes. You know, it was just
and it has changed. I mean, your point at the beginning, Paul, it has changed Scotland. Now, you know, it has changed how we do politics, how we deal with politicians. It has changed how they, you know, treat journalists and treat their voters, treat their base. It has changed things, undoubtedly. I wouldn't say for the better, and as I say, we've already gone through the actual state of the country, but I think, you know, in people's kind of hearts and minds, it's changed things, whatever side you're on.
It's very hard once the genie's out the bottle to kind of cock the bottle back up. And the independence genie has been out the bottle for 10 years. If you'd asked me 8 years ago, you know, will the UK break up? Will Scotland be an independent country? Will there be an indyref? I would have said absolutely 100%. Not quite so sure now. But I don't know the answer to how it goes away, because, I mean, at the end of the day, the SNP are still the party of government. They're still the dominant party in Scottish politics. I know they faced a rather chastening general election, but people can't ignore that. What would be nice to see, I think, from the SNP and the national side is some sort of acknowledgement that they're trying to take away quite a big part of some people's identity. And it's not just about, being Scottish or the economy. I mean, it was probably the economy what won it, but they also wanted to take something away from an awful lot of people. I think deep down, a lot of Scots who might in public say otherwise still have a sizable number, still have an affinity with the idea of Britain, certainly culturally. And it'd be nice sometimes if the SNP acknowledged that some people feel British, some people feel Scottish and British, and there's no contradiction there. And it just seems that they can completely dismiss any idea that can be possible, any idea that someone could see that, the UK is their country. It's
They need to get out and talk to people that aren't in the SNP and aren't voting SNP. They really need to get out and talk to their opposites. That's how you learn, and that's can inform how you think, how you govern, and what policies you come up with, and what ultimately could convince people that independence should be on the table.
Bloody hell, I feel like I need an appointment with a therapist after this session.
I know, but it's one of these very strange topics. So there is a few about at the moment that, you're almost kind of uncomfortable discussing it.
Paul, was it the vow that won it?
Well, I mean, this is another fascinating element that goes back to Salmond, because I think to anyone who looks at this result impartially, it was clearly the dodgy economic case for independence that Salmond put forward that was responsible for the defeat. It was things like currency deficit. People with something to lose weren't willing to make that leap into the dark. He just didn't persuade people. But over the last decade or so, Alex Salmond's been in denial. He's not willing to accept that it was his own economic case. And so he's looking for a plan B, to coin a phrase. And that plan B is the Daily Record's vow front page 2 days before the referendum. And if you listen to the experts, like John Curtis, Professor James Mitchell, they just feel that is nonsense. And I did notice a variation of the Blame the Newspaper theme by Salmond in the last couple of weeks, where he said that the failure of the Scottish Sun to endorse Yes was another major factor. And I'm like, come on. I mean,
it's interesting. Had they endorsed, and it did look possible at some point, Paul, if you remember. Had they endorsed the SNP a couple of weeks or even 3 weeks before, certainly you think about newspaper circulations at that point, and I can understand, but I thought that was interesting as well, and probably far more relevant than the Daily Records and the vow.
It was a pretty spectacular bottle job, I always thought, for the Sun. It was a just sit on the fence was really cowardly, in my opinion. But I mean, the vow just maybe had a minor impact.
Great front page.
Great front page. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done, Murray Foot. Well done, Murray.
Where's he now?
I'm sure
if you're listening, Murray, it was you that won it. Well done, Murray. But we don't hear much about Murray in the vow these days. He's off doing something completely different.
Well, that is a good question, Paul. Would you not expect to hear of the chief executive of the SNP on the 10th anniversary of the indyref?
You would think so, and yet he's taken a vow of silence, to coin a phrase. But I think that he put together a wonderful front page, and if I was him, I would be tweeting about it constantly this week.
I'd probably put it in a t-shirt and just wear it about, so people can see it.
Indeed, right. Okay, listen, thank you to Lorna and to Douglas for that. Next week, Lorna and I will be reporting back from Labour conference in Liverpool. which will be a hoot. I've got no doubt to say that. So I hope you enjoyed the anniversary edition of Planet Holyrood, and I hope you join us again next week.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
I was furious to hear about these things.